Right, let's see. Right, I shall now gather the poll results. Right, here we go. And over to you, Laura. I don't know if you can see the results. I've published them to the attendees.
Thanks, Rob. Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Can't see the results. Just looking to see.
Right. Okay. So we have 31% administer a scheme.
Great.
41% manage a graduate.
Yep.
14% are graduates.
Yep.
And 13% are none of the above.
Okay.
Right, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Rob, and welcome to your webinar, the 4 key areas that create an outstanding graduate engineering program. So I'm your host for this webinar alongside Rob. I'm Laura Cruz. I am an associate trainer and coach for IMechE. I'm also a leadership development expert, a coach, a mentor, a facilitator, a podcaster, and soon to be author. Really great to have you here today, and lovely to have such a mix of, I guess, kind of roles, you know, who have joined the course. So thank you very much. As Rob has said, if there's anything that you have a question about or you're not sure about, please do feel free to use the chat function, pop your questions in there, and when we get to the end of the session, Rob and I will endeavour to answer those for you. So let's crack on. Oh, why will my slide not move? Okay, here we are. So to set the context of this session then, the reason that this session was put together was to really help you to understand the importance of having a graduate engineering program, but also to kind of understand the big why around it. So the context for this webinar is that the scheme should be offering a balanced mix of technical and non-technical skills. I guess sometimes there is a tendency to veer towards the definitely technical skills. Actually, what we're talking about today is really that mix, that blend of technical and non-technical. The context is also to make sure that the graduates have a smooth transition into the workplace. It's quite interesting. We've got 14% of you listening who are graduates, so that would be interesting at the end to maybe hear about how that's been for you. Actually, a graduate scheme is a great opportunity for graduates to extend their learning in a real workspace alongside experienced engineers. So obviously graduates have just come out of their degree program. So how do they take all that knowledge and that kind of textbook and bring that to life alongside professionals in their field? So over the next 45 minutes to an hour, we will explore a real focus on the how, the what and the why of running a graduate scheme. And I'd just say to you that it's easy to forget how challenging it can be when you first enter the working world, particularly if it was some time ago. I know it was for me. So I'd like you to kind of take yourself back to what it was like when you first graduated and you entered the scheme. So the majority of the webinar will be about you, the people who are on this call who actually administer a scheme or who run or support graduates, but there'll also be a bit at the end about graduates and what we at IMechE think graduates should do to approach a scheme really well. So the 4 levers for a structured, an outstanding graduate engineering program. The first one being the structured development plan. So why do you need a structured development plan? Well, this lever is probably the most crucial of the levers in my view. If you work for a much larger organization, you probably have this already. Although I did see in the chat, there's some people from smaller organizations with a smaller number of graduates. If you come from a smaller organization, you will probably need some support to help you to create a structured development plan. You might not know what that entails. You might not know how to create that. You might not know what that would look like. IMechE can absolutely support you to create that structured development plan, which will be something bespoke to your organisation. So not something just off the shelf, but something bespoke to you. Remember that for many graduates, this will be their first entry into the workplace. Don't underestimate the enormity of that. That's a huge deal for somebody as they enter the world of work. So the reason you want to put that structured development plan is because you want to welcome your graduates in the best way possible. And a clear and structured development plan is the way to reassure your graduates. Education and that degree that your graduate will have come from provides a really structured approach to learning, and your scheme should do the same. So it should complement what they've already learned and help them to ease into that world of work. The other reason that a structured development plan is so important is it means there's no or perhaps little chance of ambiguity. So if it's structured, if it's clear, if it's open and honest, then there's little chance that the graduate will kind of misunderstand or be unclear about what is expected of them. Structure suggests commitment and importance and also a shared goal. So you might be thinking, okay, well, how should a well-structured plan look then? What should it include? Well, it should be clear, it should be detailed. It should cover things like this. So what will the graduate be doing? When and for how long? Who might that graduate work with? What might that work look like? What will the graduate need to do? Perhaps what is the overarching goal that you have for the graduate? So there will be smaller goals, but there will be one overarching goal that you have that you want the graduate to have achieved by the end of the programme. Are you expecting the graduate to work in one particular department? Are they going to work in a specific area or in a project, or will they move around? Your structured development plan should detail that. What will you expect the graduate to have achieved by the end of the programme? How will you quantify that or measure it? Will the graduate have to do something at the end of the programme? So will they have to give a presentation, be interviewed? I'm sure they won't sit an exam, but there might be some measure of how they conclude the programme. And perhaps what will happen after? So once the graduate finishes the programme, however long that programme is within your organisation, what will happen after? Now, don't worry, I don't think you need to commit to a certain role or a certain kind of end game, but you perhaps need to state what some of the possible options could be. The worst thing to do would be to leave the graduate guessing about what will happen next. The structured development plan should include defined milestones. So if the graduate programme is a 2-year programme, there have to be milestones between month 1 and month 24. What would those be? How will the graduate know how they're progressing with those? Would it be that at the end of each month, each quarter, each year, the graduate should have received a certain level or have completed certain tasks? These are all the elements that should make up the structured development plan. Essentially, the plan should summarise the how. So I've told you why you should have a plan, and I've told you what the plan should be, but how do you make sure that you actually land that really well with your graduate? Well, you need to introduce it well, and you need to engage the graduate. Engage is a word used often in the leadership development world, and it's such an important one. To engage is to excite, to kind of elicit interest, to share a thought about what the graduate will achieve by the end. So when you're landing that plan, when you're going to put that development plan into your graduate, explain it in full and remember to be patient. You might understand it very well because you've worked for that organisation for some time, or because you've had many years of experience in your field. Somebody new to the world of work may not understand that. So the aim of the introduction of the plan is for the graduate to feel engaged and excited. Talk to the graduate about what they personally hope to get from the programme, not what you hope them to get, not what you want them to get, but what they hope to get from it. And those things could be the same, but could be different. Make sure that that plan is shared with all relevant parties. So anybody who's going to be one of the, department or somebody who's going to be supporting with that plan, make sure that everybody can have access to it. Can the graduate easily access the plan and see their progress? There's something our brains really like about being able to observe progress. So if you want your graduate to feel that they're on track and progressing well, they need to be able to see that, perhaps visually. All of these things will help you to maintain engagement levels. But remember that not everybody absorbs information in the same way. So allow time for discussion and questions. You may need to explain the plan in more detail to some people than you will others. So I've got some top tips for your structured development plan. So firstly, make sure that the plan is clear and detailed. The plan should include a set of overarching goals. So what would the graduate achieve by the end of that programme? Make sure there are milestones along the way, so you're not just expecting them to go from month 1 to 24 or 36, however long your programme is. Make sure that you're showing the graduate the how. How will they achieve that? And don't forget or don't underestimate the importance of engaging and exciting your graduate. So the second lever I want to talk to you about is the importance of immersing your graduate into your business and into the culture. So as we've already said, graduates starting into the world of work, it's a new environment. They might have a lack of confidence, perhaps be scared to ask questions. You're investing in your graduates. You're introducing them to the world of work when they start their program. Even if they've done work before, it might have been in a very different business with a different culture. You want your graduate to be an advocate for your business, to speak well about it outside of the organisation. Plus, of course, you want them to stay. Retention's the name of the game for sure. So understand that the graduate is in a new environment and support them to get used to it. Make sure that the graduate builds the confidence to ask questions, to seek advice, and to ask for support. Your organisation invests money into graduates, but also time and effort. Done well, and the return on investment will absolutely exceed what you initially invested. So if I was to ask you, what does your business do? You might say, well, that's a really obvious question, Laura. But sometimes we don't really know what the business actually does. So what does your business do? What is the culture and ethos of the organisation that you work for? How can a graduate understand all that is involved with your business? Who do you work for? So who does your business help? Who are your customers, your clients? Who are the businesses you work with, you partner with? Who do you work with, for, and why? What's your mission of the business? What would you say your business aims are, and how do you hope to achieve them? And if you know all of that, how can your graduate be a part of that? Whether you've got one graduate or 100, how can they be part of that overriding business aim? Now, the question about culture is a really interesting one. As I ask that, you might be thinking, what is the culture of our business? It's such an important question. If you don't know what it is, I'd suggest that you try and find out. If you can't articulate it yourself, you won't be able to engage a graduate into that. So if you don't know the culture, find it out. Have you got a mission or a vision statement for the business? If you have, is it easy to remember? Is it something that the graduate could get on board with? How do people behave in your organisation? What's the ethos? These are big questions. Something as well in there about your values. What are your values of the business? Often values are quite static, quite written on a wall somewhere and not actually used. But if you can't articulate what they are, how can you get your graduate on board with them? So if you aren't sure about any of these that I've talked about, your vision, your mission, your values, your ethos, your culture, maybe they're not that clearly stated. Maybe they're not visible. Maybe they're not easy to articulate. Maybe they're out of date. Maybe they don't represent where you are right now as a business. So this is something to look at, not just for your graduates, but for the whole business. So these things that we've talked about, this immersion in business and culture, is important for recruitment, it's important for engagement, and of course, it's important for retention, but also for the overall success of the business. So how do you go about then immersing your graduate into your business and culture? So you might run an induction event. You might have an onboarding meeting. You would do colleague introductions, perhaps some buddying up. How do you communicate all of that to your new graduates? Induction events are great for bringing your graduates together. Even if you work for a smaller business where you don't have as many graduates, you can still have a fantastic induction session, induction event. Don't feel that you can only have it if you have a large number of graduates. Induction events are great for bringing your graduates together. Remember, it's a shared experience, so your graduates are all starting at the same time. The graduate events, the induction events, should be fun as well as informative. So yes, you want to impart information. Yes, you want to get them on board with your business, but actually team building activities and fun things, finding out information about each other is really important. Team building activities are as valuable as sharing information about the business. So if you have a smaller business, you can still have induction style day or days. Onboarding is absolutely massive in the world of HR at the moment, in the world of learning and development. So how you onboard your graduate is absolutely crucial. If your onboarding process is poor, you may struggle to retain your graduate or indeed any employee within your business. So how do you onboard? Do you understand what that looks like? Make sure that the onboarding meeting is a one-to-one opportunity for the graduate to ask questions. Sometimes group environments will leave quieter graduates feeling that they don't want to speak up. So give graduates an opportunity to speak one-to-one with somebody. Onboarding is absolutely not sitting in front of a laptop completing health and safety training. It's got to be so much more than that. Introduce your graduates to key stakeholders and the people they will be working with. Make sure those introductions are warm, friendly, and most importantly, scheduled. Nobody wants to feel that it's a really quick intro because somebody's rushing off to a meeting. Make sure that those people that you are introducing them to are open and warm and want to connect with newbies within the business. Finally, you can buddy your graduate up with either a new graduate or somebody within the business who will be supportive. A buddy scheme is a great way to keep graduates supported on a more informal basis, which will complement the other support mechanisms you already have in place. Buddy schemes will require some management though. Who would be the best person to support that? Who would have some time to make sure that the scheme is running well? So here's some top tips about immersion in business and culture. Make sure that you understand and therefore can clarify your business culture, your values, your mission, and your vision to the graduates that are joining your organisation. Make sure that you're onboarding well. Onboarding is often the remit of HR, so make sure that you have spoken to somebody within your HR department to understand what that would look like. Use induction events to your strength. They can be as big or as small as they need to be. They don't have to be just one day. And make sure that you've considered using a buddy scheme. This is a much more informal way to keep your graduates engaged, interested, supported, and on track. So the third lever I want to talk to you about today is management and mentoring. There's a distinct difference between management and mentoring, which I'll go into. Line management is a given. Mentoring isn't. That's the key difference. So why do you need that then? Why does somebody need management and mentoring? And what is that key difference between them? So management, line management, is in the moment. It's part of the graduate's role. Everybody within business has a line manager, right? Everybody has somebody that they report into who is their manager, line manager, supervisor, whatever the name that you use. Often there's no choice in terms of who would line manage the graduate, because if you put the graduate in a specific department, that's the manager who's going to look after them. It's important with management to recognise that there will be different personality styles, different fits, and sometimes a really strong graduate will perhaps fare better under a different line manager. So that's absolutely something to consider. So Make sure that you recognize different personality styles and fits. But ask yourself, do you have strong managers or leaders within your business? Do you have people, line managers, people managers, do you have those people who have an interest in developing people? There's little point in putting a graduate in with a manager who has no interest in developing new people. Now, it isn't everybody's strength to be that people developer. I've seen that in my years of corporate experience. So it's not a criticism of somebody if it's not their forte, but find the people who do enjoy helping other people to succeed. So line management support is vital for everyday support, for questions, for training, for coaching. That's what I would expect from a line manager, and I'm sure that's what you would too. But mentoring sits outside of that. The benefit of that is that mentoring is much more objective. It's more supportive. It can help with coaching as well as mentoring. So who in your organization would be a strong mentor? Do you know anybody? Do you have a mentoring scheme? What experience, skills, or personality would they bring to the table? And if the word mentor is one that you are just trying to work out how that differs from coaching. So a mentor is somebody who's been through that and can give advice. A coach generally doesn't give advice. The mentor brings advice and experience to the table. So I've said then that the difference is, so what are they? Well, line management is feedback, mentoring is guidance and advice. So let's explore that a little further. The graduate's line manager is, of course, super important to help with day-to-day line management and absolutely crucial for keeping the graduate where they need to be and support them with whatever they're working on. So the line manager will provide direction, support, feedback, and sometimes challenge. But the mentor can help in a different way. The mentor can coach, mentor, guide, advise, and all of those things take place outside of the current task or moment. So whereas the line manager is absolutely in the thick of the project or the work or the task that's being completed, then the mentor would be talking to the mentee or the graduate outside of that at a different time. The advantage of that is that allows time for reflection. And reflection is absolutely crucial if your graduate wants to be professionally registered with IMechE and to kind of their ongoing CPD. Reflection is absolutely key in terms of developing your professional skill and making sure that you are continually developing yourself as a professional within an engineering organization. So if you're thinking, that sounds brilliant, having a mentor, how would I do that? I'd encourage you to think about how you can match mentors with the graduates based on personality. How will you match them up to make sure that the energy, the personality, the approach matches up? So if you have somebody who is very, very shy and a graduate who's very shy and you match them with somebody who's very outspoken as a mentor, that may not work. However, I would say that you don't always have to be the same. Sometimes opposites do attract too. So set a framework for how that mentoring relationship will work. What's it going to be like? How are you going to manage that? How can you make mentoring the norm in your organization? And how can you set up a mechanism to match your graduates with mentors? How do you consider personality, both of the mentor and the graduate, experience, attitude, and importantly, time available? So if the mentor is fantastic, but they just literally don't have the time for the graduate, there's no point in matching them up together. So make sure that you've considered those factors. Think about what that mentoring support would look like. If you had a mentor, what would you want from them? What do you want your graduates to get from that mentor relationship? Is it a set number of sessions? Is it a set number of hours? Is it a commitment from the mentor and the graduate in terms of overall time? Try to state what good looks like in terms of mentoring for your organization. So I don't want to say rules, but have a guide of what good looks like for mentoring in your organization. And most importantly, agree how you will measure success. Success when you're helping people to develop their own skills looks different to success perhaps in a more technical way. So how can you measure success? What would that look like? How would the graduate feel if they'd had a mentor that was really supportive and effective? How would they feel at the end of that? So here's some top tips for your mentoring, line management and mentoring. So make sure that you have grasped the concept of your graduates needing both a manager and a mentor, because they do need both, absolutely do need both. Look at how you can evaluate the leadership skills of the manager who's going to manage the graduate. So do they have what it takes to really support that graduate to develop and grow within your business? Make sure that you've agreed what a good mentor looks like. And this is absolutely something to get colleagues on board with, because you will all have a different view. And make sure that you set up a well-structured mentor program. So have a kind of guide about what that would be like, what it would look like, what the end result would be, how you'll measure success. So the fourth lever of building an outstanding graduate program is to make sure that you've got clear objectives and purpose. Now you might say, I thought we'd already covered this, because you said at the beginning, Laura, that the first lever was the structured development plan. And of course it is. The structured development plan is super important, and I think probably the most important of the levers. But the fourth lever here, clear objectives and purpose, is different. So if you are going to set clear objectives and purpose for your graduate, why do you do that? Well, because it keeps the focus, the energy, and the engagement up for that graduate. It makes sure there is no room for confusion. And it gives both the graduate and the organisation much greater clarity about what is expected of the graduate by the end of the programme. So let me explain why that's different then to what we said at the beginning about the structured development plan. Clear objectives and purpose are much more personal. And the reason they're important is because goal setting is your brain's best friend. So when we goal set in life, once you set those goals, your brain can't really tell if you've hit them or not. So your brain is really engaged and quite excited by them. And when you write goals down, you're kind of almost halfway there, because your brain thinks, oh, I've done that already. So the reason goals are important then, objectives, goals, purpose, with your graduate, is because when a graduate first starts work, it can feel really, really overwhelming. Really overwhelming. And it's important to ensure that your graduates stay focused and energized. Confusion is absolutely a surefire way to reduce confidence and self-belief at work. And once somebody's started to feel less confident, it's harder to pull them out of that. If you set clear objectives and purpose, you should hopefully minimize this risk. And the clarity is crucial for both parties. So what is it then? What are these clear objectives and purpose? So as I've said, it's not the same as the development plan that we mentioned on lever 1. It's personal, it's flexible, it's shorter term. So when I say personal, it's personal to that graduate. It's flexible because it's about them. So your structured development plan is your overriding plan that you have for any graduate who comes into the business. The clear objectives and purpose are absolutely personal to that particular graduate that you are talking to. So they're personal, they're flexible, they're perhaps shorter term. So the clear objectives and purpose can be adapted as the graduate progresses on their graduate journey. Don't be fooled into thinking that the structured development plan is the only thing the graduate will need, because it absolutely isn't. The development plan is generalized, so it's all for all graduates across the business, or at least per department. Objectives and purpose should be as unique as the graduate themselves. The objectives can be much more flexible because they are unique to the individual. They can also be set over a much shorter time frame. This helps with engagement, as the graduate can experience some quick wins again, there's something in our brain about how when we set goals and we are able to tick off a couple of ones really quickly, our brain really likes that. If you've ever heard the phrase low-hanging fruit, it's when you go to a fruit tree, you pick the fruit at the bottom because it's easier to pick. It's the same with goals. The quicker the wins, the more focused you are, the more energized about what you want to achieve. And if the graduate is progressing well or quickly, more quickly than you imagined, great. So you can adapt or flex the objectives according to the progress that that graduate is making. Remember, the structured development plan is for everybody who is a graduate within your business. These objectives and purpose that you're going to set, because they're unique to the individual, that allows certain graduates who will pick something up more quickly or who will, pick something up and run with it. It allows them to be free to do that. It also means that graduates who are perhaps slower to progress, there's no problem. It's not an issue. And we know that we've talked about people learning in different ways. So it's fine because you can flex according to the speed or the progress or the confidence of that individual. So how do you make sure that you've engaged the graduate into these clear objectives and purpose then? Well, the how is really to have honest and open conversations. Make sure that you're having regular progress reviews. So how is that graduate getting on with their objectives and purpose? How are they feeling about it? What's going on with them? This is why it's really important to have people who conduct these reviews or kind of set these objectives for the graduate. Who it's important to have people who are really invested in the development of that person, who really will have the time to listen and support. So you need regular progress reviews. And when I say regular, whatever works for you and works for the graduate, you need to give clear feedback. Feedback is absolutely crucial for every business, but also for graduates who are starting off into the world of work. So graduates will need regular conversations about their progress, and they will need feedback, positive and constructive. These reviews or these conversations with the graduates, they could be formal or informal, depending on the subject or situation. So perhaps you've got more formalized progress reviews set in stone, but you also have some more informal kind of chats over lunch or a coffee to see how the graduate is getting on. Openness should be encouraged. This is how you get the best out of people. So the more you are able to encourage the graduate to talk about how they're getting on, the more you will get from them. I understand that this is difficult for some people, but openness is absolutely crucial in terms of people development, both on the side of the graduate and the person who is supporting. Feedback, as I've said, is an absolute must. Feedback is always given and should always be given with the spirit of improvement. So it's positive and constructive. Negative feedback is criticism and does nothing for anybody. So set your graduates up for success in their working life by normalizing feedback. They won't know how they're getting on unless they get feedback. You need to understand how they're progressing, understand how they're feeling, understand where their energy levels are, and you will help them to do more and achieve more and be more focused by giving them feedback. So here are my top tips for the clear objectives and purpose. Remember that this differs from the structured development plan. So objectives are more personal, they're more short-term, they're more flexible. Because they are these things, you can adapt them according to the progress made by the graduate. There's no comparison with other people. This is very personal to the graduate. Make sure that you conduct regular progress reviews so that the graduate knows how they're getting on, how they're faring against those objectives, and there's an openness in those conversations, and make sure that feedback is delivered on a regular basis. So those are the 4 key levers that IMechE believe will help you to implement an outstanding graduate program. But what about for the graduate themselves? And I know that we've got some graduates on the call. So I've got some tips for you too. graduates. So how do you approach your scheme? And it would be interesting if in the chat box at the end if you've got some thoughts on how this has worked for you. Starting employment can be many things, and this doesn't really matter whether you're a graduate or anything. Any time that you enter the workplace for the first time, you will experience a real mix of emotions and feelings. It could be exciting, daunting, interesting, boring, challenging, easy, straightforward, difficult, etc. It could be any of those things, perhaps all in one day, or it could be any of those things on different days, or it could be none of those things. So my first tip for a graduate joining a scheme is to be open-minded. Don't go in with a fixed idea of what you think it's going to be like, because it probably won't be like you thought it was going to be. Stay open to what it is and what it could be. Even if it isn't quite what you think it should be at the start or what you hoped it would be, stay open-minded that it could change and it could be better. The more open-minded you are, the better, because if you go in with a fixed approach and it isn't that thing, you could find that your mindset is shifting and becoming quite negative. You want to be open-minded. That's absolutely the best way to get the most out of your graduate scheme and the most out of the organisation you work for and the people you will be working with. So tip 2, be a great team member. So what do I mean by that? Well, do you know what? Be the team member that you would like to work alongside. So that great person that you worked with before, even if it was a kind of weekend job, what were they like? What was so great about them? How can you be more like that great team member? Be the person that people want to see when they walk into work in the morning. So how do you become a great team member, or how do you display that you're a great team member? Well, you engage with what's going on in the team or in the department or in the office, the setting. Make sure that you listen to what people are saying. Be supportive of what other people are doing. Contribute where appropriate. Sometimes I think when we enter the world of work for the first time, there's often an overconfidence. So be mindful of how you contribute. Share your ideas, your thoughts, your experiences, and be positive. Nobody likes working alongside somebody who's negative all the time. It's really draining. The third tip for your graduates then is to network. And this is something which is probably often mentioned when you are graduating, but networking is such a crucial part of your graduate experience. Network both across your organization as well as outside of it. If you haven't used LinkedIn, get on it. I myself have a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn, but it is incredibly useful. So connect with like-minded people or people from similar industries on LinkedIn. Attend industry events. Get on board with the stuff that IMechE do. Fantastic work. Get curious about all that is out there and the people that you network with. I think sometimes LinkedIn does get a bit of a bad press, but it is an amazing way to make sure that you connect with people across the world in differing organisations, but with kind of a real shared enthusiasm and excitement for what the projects that they're working on. So tip 4, broaden your experience. So what do I mean by that? Well, get curious about all the opportunities that lie within the world of engineering. So as a graduate, you have a work scope, you've got a development plan, and you're going to have a set of objectives. Hopefully you'll have a mentor and you'll be immersed in the culture. But what else could you be doing? Don't just limit yourself to the role or the department you're in. I'm not saying overstep the mark, but actually find out more about the business. So look for ways to grow your knowledge, your reputation, and your experience. Think about how you are viewed within your organisation, what your reputation is. How do people talk about you? That is so important when you are growing your experience when you first start out into the world of work. And the final tip I'd have for graduates then is take responsibility for the development journey that you are on. It's nobody else's responsibility but yours. You are the master of your own life, your career, how you choose to react to things. So take responsibility for it. Do the work. And I don't just mean the physical work, but I mean the reflective work. I mentioned earlier about how important reflection is if you want to be professionally registered with IMechE. It's such an important tool in terms of how you progress as an engineer. So do that reflective work. Think about how things have gone each week, each month, whatever. Reflect on it. Think about what you would do again, what you might do differently. Think about how you might do better next time, but do the reflective work. Think about how you are showing up, how you're performing, where your energy is, what your attitude is. That goes back to being a great team member, right? So just think about how you are being. Who are you when you're at work? And take the responsibility of being the best version of you when you're at work. All of these things are within your remit. And if you are keen to progress, you will need to spend time working on these areas. As I said, this is your responsibility, and this is how you can proceed as a fantastic team member, as a fantastic graduate, as part of your scheme. So, any questions?
Hi, Laura. We have a couple, and to be fair, they've stimulated some excellent discussion in the chat box.
Okay.
We have one, and whether it might be worth you reading some of the responses before engaging or adding your advice, I don't know. But certainly the two we've got here are how do you immerse the graduates in a culture with hybrid working? So how do you
Interesting.
with hybrid working? And as I say, we've had some excellent from Dominic. We had excellent replies from Owen and Tony and Mehdi and Emma and Mark and people like that. So it may be worth putting the Lexide on, having a read, and then coming back to that with your thoughts.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me have a look through.
And the second question was about on a graduate scheme having graduate scheme projects versus live projects, and again, there's some nice comments in there about people's experience. If you want to read through, if you put the next slide up, I'll talk through that while you're having a look.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, Laura. And again, this screen here, this slide here, is really to demonstrate how IMechE, through its various departments, training and membership, can help you either with a light touch on your current scheme or help you set up, manage, and develop a scheme. And again, there are three real elements to how we can support you: the development and training side of things. So actually, the workshops, the courses, the knowledge itself. And again, if you have a current scheme and you think you're short on some content, we're more than happy to add in and provide onto that. We can then encompass that with managing a scheme, setting it up, managing it, that sort of thing. And finally, we can also add in the support from our membership colleagues to be able to link in and run side by side with helping and supporting the graduates through their travels to become a chartered, incorporated, or EngTech engineer. And again, you can see at the bottom there, if you visit our IMechE.org training qualifications graduate program, you can see more information on that. And I will put that URL in the chat box for you. And then here it goes. Are you ready to come back on some of the questions then, Laura?
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Over to you.
So I think it's good. I was just reading through some of the questions, but also some of the comments. So the hybrid working one is obviously very, very interesting. And I don't claim to be an expert in terms of how that would work in an engineering sense, but I do know how that's worked for me over the last couple of years in terms of that balance. I think the key thing is to make sure that if hybrid is going to become, or hybrid is the norm for that graduate, is to then set the parameters of what that would need to be. So, and I think it's really important to have a mix of kind of informal and formal when you are when hybrid working is there. It's very challenging, and I think it's hugely challenging, particularly when you are first entering the world of work, when you're not even in an office at all. hugely challenging, and I absolutely get that. But I think as we progress, the hybrid becomes the norm. But I think the formal and the informal is super important, and just encouraging the graduate to be open and honest about kind of what's happening with them if they are struggling with it. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I think certainly one of Owen's comments sort of resonated with me, and that's the support from the senior management team and the people at the top end to be visible. And know certainly that not only graduate schemes, but certainly on some of our major programs, having the senior management or a senior manager give a 5-10 minute presentation at the start of each session or each course engages the attendees, the delegates in this case, and also reinforces that the fact that the company is supporting it and behind you, and the fact that you're not just turning up for something that you think is just something you've had to come to, that there is a real support from the senior managers behind that. And that certainly worked in a certain number of situations that we've dealt with.
Yeah. And I think there's nothing wrong with having something like, obviously if you are all in the same place, there's the opportunity for informal kind of coffee chats. There would be nothing wrong with having something like a kind of, a set time a week where you had like a coffee drop-in. So if somebody wanted to pop in and have an informal chat with somebody, I think to look at the softer side of things, not just the kind of structure and the technical and the objectives, but also the kind of human element of the hybrid, to make sure that you are supporting that.
Excellent. And so the next question, really, the final one we've got here is about graduate scheme projects, i.e. non-live projects and live projects, and which is the best to impact.
I think there have been some really interesting comments in there about saying, I was just reading through them about the I think if you were to scroll back through the comments about, I can't remember who it was, saying that actually it worked really well to be on a live project and perhaps is more engaging for a graduate. I don't know if you saw that, Rob.
Are there any other questions from anyone? If you have them, please submit them into the chat box. Again, I've put in there information about our LMS system, how to get access to this recording. It will be probably early next week, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, once we've edited it and got it up there to be accessed. But also there are probably in excess now of 50, 60 of these up there that cover a vast variety of topics that are useful and people find very useful, and can be part of your CPD. So please go along, sign into the LMS if you haven't already, and access these. I think on that note, with no further questions coming in, thank you, Laura, for an exceptional webinar, very interesting, and thank you all for attending, and some fantastic contributions from a lot of you in the chat box, and some very interesting conversations.
Thanks, Rob.